Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 4 of Rock Music History and Appreciation. I hope that you're all doing well and that you've had a great week with this craziness. I had a great time up in Calgary, and now I'm back for a month or so. Then I'll be heading to New York for a while. So, you get to travel with me, vicariously through these things. So I'd never been to Calgary before, and I actually have never been to New York City before. So I'm really excited about doing that, but that's not till October. Anyways, I hope that you're all doing well. I want to start off because I think I keep forgetting to mention this, and it's really, really important, which is make sure that you are reading my comments to your graded assignments. I go through every one. If you get a good job, great job, excellent job, that gives you hey, you're on the right track. If you get an excellent job, that means you knocked it out of the park. You got the full 50 points. Those are, if you're getting 40s, 45s, you should feel good about that. Those are B's, those are A's. But if you're getting under that, then there's something that's not quite right. If you do sort of the bare minimum, I know some of you, I can tell, are focusing on that word count. And remember that my words don't count. So the prompt doesn't count towards the total word count. It's got to be your answer only, okay? But then, some of you are just barely skimming by, and then you're getting 30s or 35s, and some of you are getting less than that. Some of you aren't hitting the word count. But I will comment about that in the assignments, right? So when I grade them, I will write a comment, and I will let you know. And again, if you get something simple and straightforward, like good job, excellent job, whatever, you're on the right track. Just make sure that you're doing what you're doing. But if there's something that's not right, I will let you know. So one of the main ones that I'm writing this too much, is, and it's not a huge thing in terms of affecting your grade directly, but that is that in the reflection observations, I put in the instructions for you to post the whole prompt at the top, okay? I do this, again, for your benefit, not for mine. I know what the prompt is, but sometimes I'm getting people that are answering them, and it's like, oh, you didn't really read, or maybe you read quickly, or maybe you didn't understand what's being asked. And so it's important to me that you do that. And if you don't do it, you'll see me say, hey, per the instructions, make sure that you're posting these things at the top. Again, I'm trying to help you out. I want you to do a great job. I want you to get, great grades. Again, don't wait till the last minute. Don't turn things in your discussions late, because that'll knock you down points. Some of you aren't replying to other posts. That will knock you down points. Some of you are replying, but it's not meaningful. It's a sentence. That will knock you down points. Do good work, okay? I think that's it. Don't forget about the concert report. The first of our big tests is coming up in a couple weeks. It draws a lot from the listening, and it also draws a lot from the materials, the book and online materials, and your quizzes. So as long as you're doing everything, you should be okay. But know that that's coming up in a couple of weeks. Again, please make sure you're listening to the playlists. I can tell with some of the answers that are being written that you didn't listen to it. I can also tell some of you don't have the book, because you're not coming up with the right thing. If you're not sure what something's asking, please double check. And I will tell you, those listening guides not only are good for helping you to understand the song, the listening guides that are in the textbook, they also sometimes will inform the answer of the assignment. So it's important that you don't just look at it and go, oh yeah, there's the listening guide. Read the listening guide. Read through it, because it's going to talk about the song. Okay, let's see how quickly I can come in. I'm going to do my best to beat 15 minutes here. But we'll see, right? I always say that. I try. I swear I go in with the best of intentions. But there's so much cool stuff to talk about. And remember that when I used to teach this face-to-face, it was 3-hour lectures, okay? So I'm trying to keep that down so that you're dealing with the book and the online stuff. One last thing. Again, I can see how much time you are or are not putting in the class, at least online, and there is sometimes a direct correlation between the grades that you're getting and the amount of time you are or are not putting in there. Okay, so this week you just have one module. So a couple weeks we had 2. This one is just 1, so that's great. It's a little lighter workload for you. And so this week is just chapter 5, Teen Styled Rock. And so if you think about what we've gone through right now, you've learned about the roots of rock music with blues and jazz and country and folk. And so we're moving through. Folk will make a reappearance. Jazz will make a reappearance. Some other things will make reappearances as well. But we've moved through. We get to blues, then we get to urban blues, electric blues. Then we get to rhythm and blues with, Louis Jordan and folks like that. And then we get to rock and roll, which is what you learned about last week, which really was about 5 years. And that's where you learned about Elvis, this, huge game changer that just blew the doors wide open for everybody, right? All of a sudden, black artists like Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Fats Domino made it even more popular because of what Elvis did. And at first they were maybe a little upset because Elvis was being called the king of rock and roll. But later when the checks started rolling in, they're like, you know what? He made us more famous than we ever would have been if he hadn't come along. And then artists like Carl Perkins, Buddy Holly, Jerry Lee Lewis, the Everly Brothers, all of those came through. Then what happens at the end in end of the 50s, 1959, we suffer some tragic losses. And I know that it was mentioned in the book. And so I think I probably mentioned the song, The Day the American Pie, the song by Don McLean, where it refers to the day the music died. And that is referring to the plane crash that killed Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, if you know La Bamba, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper. And so it was a really, really sad day. And you had Chuck Berry getting arrested, and you had Little Richard giving up music for preaching, and you had Elvis get drafted. And so things shifted a lot. Now, teenagers were a huge market by this time. They were being marketed to aggressively in terms of fashion, in terms of food, in terms of music, all of that, right? And so what happens is these folks realize, like, hey, there's this huge market. We need to not let this go. And so what comes out of that is something known as teen idol pop. Now, intermixed with the rock and roll thing and the teen idol pop is a very significant thing that happens called the payola scandal. And there were a lot of people that hated rock and roll. They hated Elvis. They hated some of them it was racially motivated, some of them it was societally motivated, but they hated it. And so what used to happen back then was that you had these few big record labels, and then you had all these independent record labels. And a lot of these independent record labels, they were all fighting to try to get airtime with their songs. And so what started to happen was that the folks, the A&R reps from the record companies started paying the DJs. They started, hey, here's the new record by Jerry Lee Lewis, and here's $100. And so it became this relationship, and because it's broadcast through federal airwaves, the FCC, that became a problem, right? Now, our whole system of lobbying, if you know how government works, is all based on payola, right? Lobbyists are paying off, congressmen and senators, and the whole system is corrupt. So you had a lot of corrupt people, because this went all the way to the federal level, and ended up, ending the career of Alan Freed. So it was pretty hypocritical, but it played a big role in changing the music business and really impacting rock and roll. So rock and roll wanes. These folks are like, hey, there's this audience here that we need to hit. And so they start marketing to these kids. And this is where the pop music. Now, pop, remember, is popular, right? It means what is popular. Popular doesn't necessarily mean bad, but if the majority of people like it, you can be suspect. The analogy I always used, forgive me if I used this in a previous video, is that McDonald's has sold more hamburgers than anybody else in the world, but that doesn't make them good, right? And we all know pop songs that we hear on the radio back then, today, that are not particularly good, right? And so you have popular music, and so they're going to market to that because that's the biggest market segment. They started to think this way. And so what happened was a couple of things. One, teen idols started. So these basically they were kind of fabricated entertainers, some that could sing, some that couldn't, not much different than today, that were kind of fabricated and created to be these fictitious boyfriends and girlfriends. And you're going to be asked about this. I'm telling you right now in an assignment, and it's going to be asked is like, is this still a thing today? It is still a thing today. It is huge today, and it's probably bigger even today than it was back then. So you had shows like Hullabaloo and American Bandstand, and of course the Ed Sullivan Show, which we've learned about and we'll hear about again with the Beatles, making these teen idols hugely popular and making the record labels a lot of money. And these teen idols, they were not songwriters, they were singers, they were entertainers, and so that meant there had to be songwriters. So people would write songs for these folks, and one of the biggest ones was a place called Alden Music, which is known affectionately as the Brill Building in New York, where you had Jerry Goffin and Carole King and Lieber and Stoller and all these amazing songwriters that would write songs and then get them out there to the artists to perform and to be big hits. And it was a big machine. And this is kind of how the popular music world existed until the Beatles came along. But we're not quite there yet, so we gotta keep going. So you're gonna learn about Brill Building pop. And you're going to learn about Phil Spector, who is a very interesting character in music history, but a very important one. And one of the first examples that we run across of someone that you may admire what they contributed to their particular field. And the world is full of these people that are, that in their field, they are amazing, but as people, maybe they are awful. And so Spector was awful. And, you can read the story, but he was crazy. But he pioneered a thing called the Wall of Sound. And it back then, this is something else let me hit this. I'll try to do it quick. Up until this time, all recordings were monophonic. And what that meant, monophonic, one sound, basically meant that, most record players or radios, it had one speaker in it. And so the sound came out the same. So if any of you have little turntables that have a single speaker in it, that's monophonic. All popular music was pretty much monophonic up until the mid-60s. And so Spector figured out this way of having very dense orchestration with a lot of instruments, and you're going to hear a couple of examples, Be My Baby and River Deep Mountain High, that are in there that really exemplify his mastery of how to take something that was all coming out of one speaker. Now, we use in music, and started in the mid-60s and still even through this day, the most popular medium is stereo, which means that, so if you put on headphones of something that's monophonic, it's the same thing on both sides. So it doesn't matter. If you have something in stereo, that means there's what we call a stereo field, which means music that can go anywhere from left to right. And so you'll hear that, especially in the mid-60s and on, where artists would experiment, the Beatles, The Who, and others later. So you would hear some instruments on one side, some instruments on another side. You'll know this if you've ever had your AirPods or earbuds or headphones on or whatever. You only have one or one's not working and stuff's missing. Like, why am I not hearing any vocals? That's why, because it's stereo. So there's a stereo field. And so anyways, up until this time, all this that we're talking about, still AM radio, all this that we're talking about, monophonic. And Spector was a master of doing that. So you had the teen idol pop songs that were becoming popular. You had songs, dances. So there was a dance. So you had like the alligator and the pony and the mashed potato. And the most famous one of all, which is the twist. And the twist was groundbreaking in the history of popular music because the twist by Chubby Checker reached young people, old people, black people, white people, everywhere across the spectrum. It broke every ground. It was wealthy, poor, didn't really matter. So the twist really was significant in the history of that. On the West Coast, there was a style of music known as surf music. Surfing was becoming popular in the 50s and early 60s. And so there was an instrumental style of surf music influenced by the guitar playing of Duane Eddy. And out of that, you get the Chantays and the Ventures. And so you're going to learn about some of those. Some of those that you'll know, Dick Dale and the Deltones. You're going to learn about some of the songs. Some of you may even recognize some of the songs that you'll hear. And then that surf sound leads us into the Beach Boys. I could do a whole lecture. You could see Brian Wilson's face looking over my shoulder back there. I could do a whole super long video on the Beach Boys. I love the Beach Boys, and they are. Brian Wilson is a genius. If you haven't seen the movie Love and Mercy, it gives you a little bit of insight. John Cusack plays older Brian Wilson. Paul Daniel plays younger Brian Wilson, but the impact that he had and still has to this day. And if it wasn't for work that the Beach Boys did and Brian Wilson did, we probably wouldn't have had some of the work that the Beatles did. All right, we just hit 15. Give me another minute or two. So the Beach Boys, it was four, three brothers, a cousin, and a neighbor, and they kind of hopped onto this surf scene, and they started making surf music. If you listen to Surfing USA, it was pretty much ripped off from Chuck Berry's Sweet Little 16, but then that's common, how artists learn. You learn from others, and then you start to develop your voice. And Brian Wilson was very influenced by rock and roll, but he was also influenced by the jazz and the Four Freshmen. And he started to come up with that really signature Beach Boys sound of music and harmony and everything like that. And then he kept pushing the envelope. He had a nervous breakdown. He had to quit touring. He had some anxiety issues. He also had some drug issues. They all did, but he had, and it changed things. And because he stopped touring, it freed him up to create. And out of that, he creates what is now considered to be one of the masterpieces of popular music, the album Pet Sounds, with the great songs God Only Knows. How am I blanking on you'll see it. You'll get to it. It's just without a doubt one of my favorite albums. It wasn't really very critically received when it came out, but now people look at it and they realize, what a genius he was for doing that. And that had a big influence on the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's. So you're going to learn about that, and that'll take it through that. Next week, we'll learn about soul and Motown, which is a whole different thing that's all happening at the same time. And I want you to be mindful of dates, just in the back of your mind, because all of this stuff is all happening all at the same time. All this great, amazing art. Okay, so I think that's it. I gave you all the warnings at the top. I did all the things. There was no show and tell. I tried to keep this shorter. The questions have been popping up through, so hopefully you're doing that. Do not delay. I know I'm preaching to the choir if I'm doing this, but don't delay on any of your assignments. Don't put things off. Get it all done. I had a student reach out to me after a week was closed, asking if they could do the assignment. The answer is no. Once a week is closed, it's closed. All right, weather's crazy. Hopefully it's a good week ahead. At least it's cooler. Hang in there, guys.